Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to this week's episode, number 91. Today, we're going to talk about the concept of using microskills to improve what you do as an independent consulting business owner. I cannot wait to share this concept with you. I realized I needed to share it with you because I was getting interviewed on another person's podcast, and I started talking about this concept that I've been using with my clients lately to great success. I didn't name it in working with my clients, my independent consulting business owner clients. Hadn't really named this concept, but as I was talking with this other podcaster and getting interviewed for his podcast, this idea of calling it microskills came out of me, and he loved the idea. He told me he's going to share it with everyone and give me credit, but I realized I can't share this on someone else's podcast and not share it with you too. So that's what we're going to be focusing in on today. And I'll share with you here in a minute what it is, obviously, is using this concept of micro skills in order for you to become more successful as a business owner, as the person running the business. So that's what we're going to be talking about today and dive into most of the aspects of it. So with that, before we start into today's topic, though, I did want to remind you of a really popular and powerful tool that I have on my website. It's called the Yearly Planning Process for Independent Consultants. So if you're listening to this in the real time, we're in the middle of December already. Can you believe this? It's so crazy. And starting to think about next year. In fact, sometimes I'm thinking it's already 2023 and we haven't yet turned that calendar, but my mind is already in that zone. So I wanted to remind you about this particular planning workbook. Go download it from my website. It's been really popular and I've been getting a lot of good feedback, people replying after they've downloaded it and used it to let me know how impactful it was for them, how useful it was for them, as they are and as you will be thinking about what you want your business to look like next year. So go grab that yearly planning process. It's on my website, melissalieberman.com/plan. We'll put the link to that in the show notes because my name is missing all sorts of letters. My mom and dad thought it would be creative to name me Melissa with one L, one S. And it was creative, but it's also kind of frustrating because I remember back to being, young and going to places like Disneyland and, you like go into the gift shops and you would see magnets or mugs or necklaces or bracelets, that they were selling. And the name was always spelled Melissa. And I never did buy one. I guess I could have bought one and marked out the extra S. I don't know. Anyway, some childhood memories I'm sharing with you today. I don't know how we went down that rabbit hole. Now you can just buy whatever you want on Etsy, right? It doesn't matter. So anyway, my name is missing some letters is where we started with this. And we'll just put the link in the show notes so you don't have to worry about how my name is spelled. Okay, so with that, let's get back to the micro skills. Using micro skills to improve as an independent consulting business owner. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about what are these micro skills, these magical micro skills I can't wait to tell you about. And then I'll share with you a 3-step framework that you can use to select your chosen micro skill and what to do with it after you've chosen it. And then we'll end up today with a couple of examples, real life examples, so that you can understand how this works in practice. So with that, let's start off with what is this idea of a micro skill? So the way I'll define it for you is it's a very specific competency within a broader capability that allows you to accomplish a specific something in your business. So let me give you some examples. I'm going to give you quite a few here. I'm also going to put a big list of them in the show notes. So click over to the show notes from this episode. We'll put that link as well, so you can see a lot more examples than what I'm going to give to you right now. But let me really explain what this is by giving you the examples. So a capability, let's take an example of a capability, could be generating leads. That's a capability. Within the capability, you have some very specific competencies that you want to build up as part of your business process. So some examples of micro skills that map back to the capability of generating leads would be things like the micro skill to convert an in-person networking conversation into a follow-up call to discuss potential opportunities. Do you see how micro that is? The skill at a very micro level is being able to go to an in-person networking event of some sort, have conversations with people, and get better at those conversations, leading to an agreement in that conversation at the end to schedule a follow-up call where you can discuss potential opportunities with that person. Do you see how specific that is? Now, am I saying you should do this as part for your business? No, I'm not saying that. A lot of consultants use that in-person networking process as one of the mechanisms to generate leads. A lot of independent consultants do not use that mechanism to generate leads, that specific mechanism. So why this is important is you get to decide the specific process that you want to use to generate leads for your business. And that's a triangulation of what's really effective in terms of generating leads for independent consultants who sell their services to corporate like you do, along with what your specific ideal target audience, what resonates with them. Maybe they don't show up to a lot of in-person networking events, and so you wouldn't necessarily pick that particular micro skill. And then the third part that you want to triangulate on is what you really want to be doing. Now, you might not want to be doing anything to generate leads, but let's pick something that is at least palatable for you to start with and then move forward from there. So that's really what we're triangulating on here. And what I'm talking about today, as this example unfolds, is the ability to really get granular on the specific skill that you know will make a difference for you as you're approaching one of your capabilities, such as generating leads. So let me give you a few more examples to bring this to life. You may have a goal of generating more leads. Another micro skill that you would want to really drill it down into is, I want to get really good at converting virtual networking conversations into follow-up calls where we discuss potential opportunities. Do you see how micro that is? It's about virtual networking conversations. So you might be at a place in your business where you're really good at having networking conversations. That's not everyone, believe me, but let's say that that's where you're at. You've ripped off the Band-Aid. You're comfortable networking and meeting new people, but you start finding that those conversations aren't really leading anywhere. And so you might choose a micro skill to focus in building. That is, I really want to get good at that part in the conversation after I've met the person and established a really good rapport and the conversation is starting to come to a close. I want to get really good at converting that conversation when it's virtual into a follow-up call where we're discussing specifically potential opportunities, either with that individual or that individual might connect me to. Do you see how that's a very specific micro skill? Let me give you some more examples here. Another one, let's say that you know for your business, you want to deepen the capability of generating leads. So staying in that same capability we've been talking about, another micro skill that you might choose to focus in on is creating referrals from existing clients. You might be someone who is so grateful for and accepts referrals from existing clients when they come to you. You may choose to focus on the micro skill of purposefully, more intentionally creating referrals from existing clients and systematizing that. Do you see how that's a very specific micro skill? Another example in terms of the generating leads capability might be that you want to focus in on deepening your micro skill ability to book speaking opportunities with organizations of which you're a member. Again, listen to the specificity of what I'm sharing with you and how is kind of this micro skill within your larger capability, the processes that you use to run your business. So let me share a few more examples with you to bring this to life within the capability of selling. So another capability that you want to be having in your business, obviously, is the ability to sell your services. As we break that capability down, it's going to be made up of so many micro skills. And a few examples, when we break down selling into the micro skills, a few examples would be, I want to focus on the micro skill to get the potential client to agree to the quantified value that I calculate and they participate in calculating as part of my sales process. So that would be an example if you're someone who either sells value-based pricing or wants to leverage value as part of your sales process to help the client understand the big picture and the ultimate value of what you're delivering versus just the time that they're buying. Again, the micro skill for that could be getting the potential client to agree to the quantified value that you and the client calculate as part of the sales process. Do you see how specific that is? It's not, I want to get the micro skill of getting better at quantifying the value as part of my sales process. It's very specific. I want to get the client to agree to this quantified value. And so you're focusing in on your sales process in a very specific way, in that little sliver of the process where you're asking so many questions to quantify the value. You're confirming what you're hearing with that potential client and giving them some initial modeling to get their feedback and understanding what pushback you might get and getting them to finally say, yes, this is a business case that I personally agree to and could sell internally. Do you see how specific that micro skill is? Get the potential client to agree to the quantified value of my sales process. Another example of a micro skill within the selling capability, I want to learn to sell a 6-month advisory offer to an existing client. Again, very specific. I have so many of my own coaching clients, independent consultants like you who I work with, and they want to add advisory services to what they do. So they have more agility in their business, more flexibility in their business. And so you might start off, if you're in that boat, saying to yourself, first, I'm going to learn to sell this 6-month advisory offer to an existing client. Very specific. And then you can keep expanding out from there. But that micro skill is something that's so important as a building block of your company, a building block of the foundation against which you run your business, and a building block as you and all the skills that you need to be successful as a business owner. Okay, a couple more, and then we'll talk about the framework to implement this concept of micro skills in your business. Another example of a micro skill within that selling capability, you might say to yourself, I want to build a micro skill of sticking to my 30-minute lead generation process every business day, regardless of the results, because I want to gather data points so I know what works and what doesn't, and I'm able to refine it in a way that I know after this period of time on working on this micro skill that I can generate any number of leads in spending 30 minutes a day. Again, do you see how specific that is? The ability to stick to a 30-minute lead generation process every single day, even if you're not creating leads immediately, even if you don't have time, That's a muscle. That's a micro skill that you're building that can be such a fundamental value in your business. And then finally, as a last example of a micro skill within that selling capability is you might say to yourself, I want to learn to sell my availability to new clients that I work 4 days a week, maybe 3 weeks a month. When you're used to working, full 5 days a week, every week, except for vacations here and there, that could be a very specific micro skill of you committing to learning how to sell your availability to your clients, even if you're not charging by the hour, that you're available within these certain parameters. So hopefully that gives you some, a good variety of the types of micro skills that we're talking about right now, and ultimately why they could be beneficial to you in your business when you think about it from the perspective of focusing in on building up these micro skill building blocks versus saying to yourself, I need to get better at lead generation, or I need to get better at selling myself. You can understand when I say those two things, how much more tangible and how much less daunting it is when you're able to focus on a micro skill instead of thinking about kind of the bigger capabilities that you need to build in your business. Before we move on to the framework, I did want to just take a moment to say what a micro skill is not. A micro skill is not saying to yourself something like a task, like I need to update my website. That is not a micro skill. What would be a different micro skill kind of around your website would be framing it as, I want to build a micro skill where I learn to create 5 leads from my website per month. So you see the difference there. Hopefully that gives you a really holistic view and some food for thought around what these micro skills are and aren't. So now let's bridge into how do you leverage these micro skills in your business so that you can improve as a business owner. And then we'll wrap up with those couple of examples. So the first thing that you want to do is think about, why would this micro skill approach benefit you? Why would saying to yourself, for the next 90 days, I want to focus on these 2 micro skills, for example, whatever those 2 are, right, for you? Why would that benefit you? It would benefit you because you wouldn't be saying to yourself, I really need to fill my pipeline. That's what I hear so many consultants saying to themselves, right? I just need to focus on filling my pipeline. It's so big. It feels so overwhelming. All of these insecurities come up about how you're not good at marketing and sales, and therefore it's so easy to procrastinate and negotiate with yourself. Instead, if you look at this and say, as this first step in the approach to implement this micro skill process, say to yourself, what would make the biggest difference in my business in the next 90 days? What is the area of my business that I want to impact the most? It might be revenue. It might be more balance with your time. It might be profitability. It might be predictable cash flow, whatever that goal is, right? And then ask yourself to figure out the micro skill. If I could only improve 1 step in my business, what would make the biggest difference? And we already went over those examples, right? So you would pick one of those types of things, or I'll give you some more examples in the show notes. If you literally had no other time to do anything, and you knew that all you had time to do was improve 1 micro step in your business, what would make the biggest difference? And answer those questions for yourself. What is the area of the business you want to impact the most? And then if you could only improve 1 step in your business, what would make the biggest difference? That's what brings the ability for you to improve as a business owner down to an incredibly tangible, very pinpointed. And if you, really put in the focus time for this and just keep building up these micro skills quarter after quarter, you're not even going to recognize your business in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, let alone 2 years or 5 years down the road. So that's the first step of implementing this micro skill approach, is really for you to choose and understand why you're choosing only one or two micro skills to focus on for the next 90 days. You also want to really make an agreement with yourself, because let's say you pick two micro skills and a couple weeks down the road, you have an opportunity to go focus on something else, or something comes up that seems like it might be impactful for your business, an idea that someone brings to you. I'm not saying turn away opportunities. What I'm saying here is you want to constrain to those improvement of the micro skills for those one or two areas that you selected for those 90 days. And when new opportunities come along, then you either do them the way that you've always done them, knowing that you could always choose to focus on that thing, whatever it is, as a micro skill sometime in the future. So really commit to yourself that no matter what shiny object comes along, and there always is one, you're going to focus in on those micro skills that you selected for the next 90 days, or until that you know that you've mastered that micro skill. Might not take 90 days. However long it takes to master the micro skill, you would be committed to doing everything you can to master that micro skill, to put yourself into the position where you have a lot of reps at executing that micro skill and can evaluate your results against that micro skill until you get it to where you want it to be. The last part of this approach for the micro skill process is for you to make a very specific plan. How you're going to implement this, what success looks like, anticipate what the obstacles will be and plan for those. And you can go back and leverage episode 80. We can put that link in the show notes as well. It is what I call the QFP framework, so the quarterly focus project. So you can go back and leverage this concept of the quarterly focus project and just fold this micro skill concept into the quarterly focus project. And it'll be a great way for you to start moving the needle in your business. So go back to that episode number 80. So hopefully that gives you some ideas about how to implement and start thinking about putting this micro skill concept in place in your business. Let's end here with a couple of examples. So the first example that I want to share with you, these are client examples. I won't share any revealing details. I never do for client confidentiality. But the first example that you might relate to, a client came to me feeling really overwhelmed and not sure where to start. She was saying her pipeline was dry, that referrals weren't coming in anymore. And so she, hadn't focused on any pipeline development because her whole business had been driven by referrals up to that point. And so we took a step back and said, let's figure out what makes the most sense for you from a lead gen perspective. And so we started really unraveling and figuring out what would be the likeliest source of leads for her, the lowest hanging fruit. And for her, it was her existing network. Based on a lot of criteria that we went in to discuss, it was her existing network was the likeliest source of new leads for her. And so from there, we started really figuring out, why wasn't she already tackling that existing network? And we found that there were some very common thought processes that she had that were leading to her not pursuing her conversations with her existing network. Thoughts like, I better talk to other people who are strangers because I don't want to, quote unquote, waste the leads, that I have, relationships that I've already built. And I also don't want to talk to people that I already know, or that might be doing something similar to what I'm doing, or that I went to school with, or whatever the scenario is, because I don't want them to think I need help. And I don't want them to think my business isn't successful. And so I would prefer to not talk to those people at all, even though my existing network is really where I know the likeliest source of leads is. So that's where she was coming from. And so what we did is, in this case, we decided, we think that this particular micro skill, we can build it up in 30 days. So we set a 30-day focus on her building that micro skill of creating leads from virtual one-on-one reconnections with her alumni groups. Do you hear how specific that is? She committed to say, you know what, I want to learn how to have reconnection conversations with people who have been in similar, alumni organizations, whether it was master's degree or college or former companies that she had worked at. I want to get really good at turning those reconnection conversations into leads for myself. And that's what's going to be my micro focus. So that gives you another example, a real life example. And what we ended up really working on under, even if you peel it back another layer, as she started implementing this, it wasn't about the conversations or even what was the path or the flow of the conversation that we worked on together to build that micro skill for her. What we actually worked on were all of her mental models running behind the scenes as she was having those conversations. Of course, she's going to get a very different result if she's worried that someone's going to think that she's not successful. That's what's going on in the back of her mind as she's having the conversation versus approaching the conversation with curiosity and no judgment about who needs what or if needing something is a problem or who's successful or who isn't, and not making it about her anymore and the judgments about her, but instead shifting it into curiosity about that other person and wanting to create a connection, reestablish a connection. So hopefully that gives you another example of how putting a micro skill into place in your business. And imagine if you're someone who can get very good at creating leads from virtual one-on-one reconnections with people you already know, you have some connection to already. Imagine the possibility for you in your business. And that's what it was for her too. So the result for her in this case was she created 4 new leads in her pipeline, and those all came from introductions that these reconnections made for her. So that gives you a really good example of what this looks like in real life. And we'll wrap up today with the second example. I had a client, we'll stick in the lead generation capability. Another client came to me wanting to have more control over her pipeline and stop depending solely on referral partners. And so again, we dove into, to start off, let's look at what are the likeliest source of leads that are not the referral partners, because you want to build another channel. Her intuition said in the past, and what feels good to me and where I think the people that are my ideal clients are in networking events, whether they're virtual or in person. I know that my ideal clients go to these networking events. They're really engaged. I get a lot of energy from it. That's her specific story. It might not be yours. I'm giving you this example, not to say go do these events, but more so to say, this is how you choose the micro skill that's applied for you and your business. So from there, because those likeliest source of leads for her, based on her intuition, were attending virtual and in-person networking events attended by ideal clients. Again, we set a 30-day focus on building the micro skill of booking follow-up calls with people she met at networking events. So a micro skill of booking follow-up calls with people she met at networking events. It doesn't mean that she was creating leads. It doesn't mean that there was any specific agenda for those follow-up calls. We chose the micro skill of being able to go to an in-person event and create additional conversations so that the relationship can continue to be built. That was the micro skill for 30 days. So I think in those 30 days, she fit in like 4 or 5 networking events and had the ability to really hone this micro skill. She was working on really getting good at describing what she does and getting really good at listening and asking great questions of the other person. And the way she was thinking about herself in this conversation, the way she was thinking about the other person, the way that she was thinking about what the next step should be, and getting really what I call clean on those mental models versus going into the conversations feeling nervous or feeling like it's a waste of time if it doesn't lead to anything more specific than just another call, and really focusing in on that micro skill because she knew eventually after 1 or 2 interactions with people that they would start either bringing her into opportunities or introducing her or connecting her to people who had opportunities. So that's another example of the micro skill process in action. And the result from this example is that she created 8 new leads in her pipeline that had come from introductions that she made in these networking events. So that gives you some really tangible examples of how to apply these micro skill concept in your business. Hopefully you can see how it's such a much more effective way of approaching your goal setting, of approaching how you're building up your overall skill set as a business owner, and helping you to avoid continuing to be in the trap or falling in the trap of thinking that you should somehow innately be good at sales and marketing. Essentially you're saying to yourself, if you think that, like, I'm kind of too old in this process to learn new skills. I should already know how to sell and market myself somehow. I hear that, some flavor of that so often, and that's just not the case. We're constantly building micro skills. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing missing in your personality. All we're talking about here is you probably have some gaps in your micro skills if your business isn't hitting the numbers and giving you the fulfillment and the joy and the value that you want it to. There are some missing micro skills. So let's go put a plan in place to fill in the gap, figure out what they are and fill in the gap so that you can do it in a very doable, non-overwhelming way that builds up this foundation month over month, quarter over quarter. And like I said earlier, ultimately, your business isn't going to be recognizable if you continue doing this process month over month, quarter over quarter. It's not going to be recognizable in the next year or two in a good way, in a good way, right? So as we wrap up here, I am excited for you to go implement these micro skills. Go download that yearly planning process PDF that I shared with you. It's on my website, melissalieberman.com/retreat-checklists. You can fold this micro skill concept into it as you're really building it out for next year. And then also, if you are wondering how to work with me, sometimes I don't make it very clear. I'm going to make it very clear. I work with my clients one-on-one privately. There's no group call. There's no other coach. There is no course. There is you and I rolling up our sleeves and figuring out how you can grow your business to the next level so that you're making more money, you're spending less time making the money, and you feel so much more fulfilled doing it and confident and successful. That's what I'm passionate about. And if you are interested in really figuring out if we're a good fit to work together, you can go book a call with me at consultmelissa.com and we'll just figure it out together. All right. So fun to have you here today. And I can't wait to see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.